I'm just going to be 1,000% completely honest with you. As far as an on-air character, I felt I was better than 80% of that roster. Vince Russo believes so much of his own hype, so much of his convoluted bullshit. He believes in himself so goddamn much that he was able to confidently sit in front of those cameras and get recorded saying lines like this, believing himself so goddamn much, despite the preponderance of evidence, the mountain of goddamn evidence and bullshit sitting there behind him, surrounding him, almost engulfing him. All the bad shit that he was allowed to put on WCW television, make himself the WCW champion, but then he got hurt. Oh, the poor baby, he got hurt. You never belonged in a professional wrestling ring. You never belonged backstage as far as, maybe doing anything other than getting the wrestlers water, and even then they would have just laughed at you because you're a goddamn joke and a goddamn piece of shit. But then he was allowed to basically just put so much bullshit on there. Oh, it's Crash TV, Jerry Springer, bro, all this stuff, bro, swerve, bro. It's no wonder that WCW went out of goddamn business. And was Vince Russo the reason that WCW went out of business? No, but Vince Russo certainly hastened the decline in the view of WCW ever being a viable wrestling company in the eyes of so many wrestling fans. I say that as a WCW fan, as a fan of professional wrestling, and as somebody that will, honest to God, never say a positive thing about Vince Russo, except at least once he leaves this earth, once his head is no longer in the clouds and he's 6 feet underground, he at least can feed the worms, assuming they don't get syphilis and whatever diseases that Vince Russo happens to possess. But let's just get to it, because this is going to be fun. I'm John Renton with my review of Who Killed WCW, Episode 3, The New Blood. If you are a Vince Russo fan, you are not going to like this. Turn this off right now. Just warning you. Because if you thought what I said as a fan, I admit I'm just a fan. I've been backstage at one independent show. That's it. I've been able to talk to various independent wrestlers, but I've never been backstage at a big show. I'm just a fan. That's all I will ever be, and that's all Vince Russo should have ever been. He says he's a fan of professional wrestling, but then he contradicts himself constantly. And if you want to know my opinions on Bash at the Beach 2000, you can check out that Dark Side of the Ring review, because they're going to talk about that here, and then they're going to talk about the last few months of WCW in Episode 4. Look, this program has never really revealed a ton of new stuff. I mean, they revealed some backstage footage and a few comments, but did I buy into really anything that people, that anybody was saying, like, oh, this person did this person did this? A lot of it is just regurgitated story. WCW is well and truly past hitting the iceberg at this point. They were sinking. They were sinking fast. Now, I did retro view the entire last year of WCW. Well, at least from the reboot episode all the way to the very last Nitro. And let me tell you, trying to just review about, 6 months of Vince Russo WCW programming nearly sent me into a goddamn tailspin. Now I'm talking about the Disney cartoon. So we saw the rise, we saw the faltering, and then we saw the crash. But the crash wasn't even, fully happening yet. Eric got sent home before Fall Brawl 99. Brad Siegel, he didn't like WCW. He admits it. I'll give him credit for that. He at least admits it. I mean, Brad Siegel does seem like a weaselly little shit. Somebody that I wouldn't get along with as a wrestling fan. But we see all these clips, like the West Hollywood Blondes, Lenny Lane and Lodi. Lenny Lane, as I call him, Discount Chris Jericho, because that's what he looked like, and that's what they were pushing him as. And then, the death and resurrection of Lex Luger when he was a total package. That made no sense. I swear that actually happened before. I think that happened before Russo came in, or during the time he came in. But Bill Bush took over and decided, we made the biggest signing. We hired Vince Russo away from the World Wrestling Federation. Cool. Great. Here's the thing. Okay, I'm going to say this much about Russo. Having ideas is not the worst thing. Wrestling should be about ideas, and you should be able to pitch ideas. You should be able to get ideas out there, especially with a television production company the size of what the WWF had, or even what WCW had at that point. The problem is, Vince McMahon, for all the faults, and believe me, numerous goddamn faults, and I have very few positive things to say about Vince McMahon, even though he helped elevate the careers of a lot of professional wrestlers, but he was a sordid individual with a lot of bad shit that he did to numerous women and numerous others and everything. So, yeah, that, but at least Vince McMahon at that point was able to take any bad ideas, the numerous ones that Russo had, and say, we're not going to do that, we're not going to do that, but beaver cleavage and stuff like that made it through. And Terry Runnels having a miscarriage the same night that Foley won the world title. That's something that him and Ed Ferrara had something to do with. And a whole bunch of other stuff. The choppy your PP and all this stuff. And talk about the Attitude Era and all this. Here's the thing. There were multiple Attitude Eras. There were multiple layers of the Attitude Eras. You had the main event guys. And you had some of the mid-card stuff wasn't that bad. But a lot of it was Crash TV bullshit that has not aged well. As somebody that lived through it, there was stuff I hated when I was a teenager when I was watching the Attitude Era. I had just turned 20 just as the Attitude Era was ending. I've been watching wrestling since 1985. But anyway, Bill Bush was saying, well, now we've got their genius. And Brett knew that was bullshit. I love Brett on these things. The Rock was on board. Oh, he's gained an opportunity. The Rock has absolutely no business being involved in this. And I know that, no, he wasn't in WCW. I mean, he's a former WCW champion during the Invasion angle, which is another thing I retro-viewed. But DDP, Conan, Booker, they were like, okay, let's see what he can do. And Russo talks about his degree in journalism. I have seen Russo's blogs and tweets and everything. The man can't write for shit. And he freelanced for WWF Magazine. He wrote angles in the magazine, and then he became head writer, talking about all this. That Vince McMahon was like, this is what our show needs to be. And yes, you need to be more contemporary. You didn't need to have cartoonish stuff, have The Goon, Bill Irwin. You need to have Doink Dink and all that stuff. You didn't need to have so many, cartoonish characters. But god damn it, I mean, there's levels to this shit. And working with Ed Ferrara, and I just want to once again say about Ed Ferrara, that Ed Ferrara has lived way too long in this goddamn earth for mocking JR's Bell's palsy and existing in the periphery of professional wrestling. If I ever got a chance to actually meet the guy, you know what? I'd probably just scream at him and basically tell him as a wrestling fan that he's a piece of shit and he deserved every bad thing that has ever happened to him and everybody that treated him bad. He deserved that. And it's a shame that he didn't suffer legit injuries in wrestling, especially in WCW, for the embarrassing shit he did, the Oklahoma stuff and all that. Tell me that Ed Ferrara was beneficial to professional wrestling. If Ed Ferrara had dropped dead before he got into wrestling, would wrestling have changed? It would have gotten better. Ed Ferrara has never contributed anything positively. His mother, quite frankly, should be brought up on capital charges for not doing the right thing to get rid of him. Yeah, I'm going to fucking say that right there. If Ed Ferrara had never been born, it would have been a whole lot better. Same with Russo. I'm just going to say, because, hate to say it, ECW was already pushing, WWF to get a little bit better, and there were already people pitching ideas and everything. But, nevertheless, WCW had a sense of danger. You had to tune in. There were two sides of the Attitude Era. I'm sorry, but just so much of a bullshit where you have, again, beaver cleavage, and you have all this stuff, and you have Hawk, Draws being pushing Hawk, and him falling off the Titantron, all this stuff, and nobody liked any of that. And it was just such terrible stuff. And just the numerous things that he came up with that he was allowed to use. And he was allowed to put on television. And he didn't want to write SmackDown without a boost in pay. Okay. Yeah, Vince didn't, McMahon did not pay you, by the show. I can understand the boost in pay. I could. Because results were being produced. But he was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. He broke down and cried in Vince's office or whatever. Oh, did he find out where, or what Vince did with that previous paralegal? That's not even a joke, by the way. I bet you there's going to be more skeletons coming out of Vince McMahon's closet as far as this stuff. But, gee, I wonder what Russo was crying about. Maybe he was crying because he knew that, oh, he could write this show. But, oh, yeah, Russo, the reason that you're going to be writing that goddamn show is because you lucked into a position. He never deserved to get a job in professional wrestling. But, oh, he was a fan. Well, he sure had a funny way of showing how much of a fan he was. So he saw a new breed, new blood in the WCW locker room. made the call, didn't mention that he called while Vince McMahon and the crew were in England for, was it a pay-per-view? I think it was for was it No Mercy? No, No Mercy 99. There was one in October. There was one in May, so I don't know when he would have called while they were in England. Were they running a tour? Nevertheless, he basically, he basically becomes, the head of creative and all that stuff. And the mid-carders were all on board. They were like, okay, let's see what he can do. Because, yes, some of the mid-card guys and quite a few of the cruiserweights should have been used better. There were some that maybe didn't deserve to be elevated beyond where they were. I mean, I'm not going to say El Dandy, because who am I to doubt El Dandy? But Hogan didn't trust him. That Bischoff was responsible for a little bit of this. Well, Bischoff and Hogan were in lockstep, and I'm no fan of how Bischoff conveniently, like, lets go of the fact that he was responsible for some of the stuff, and Hogan, outside the ring stuff, beyond that or whatever, Hogan by that point didn't mean shit to WCW. He didn't. He wasn't helping the ratings, and he definitely wasn't helping the goddamn pay-per-view buys. But, Russo says he's partially responsible for costing Eric his job. Okay, so here's the thing. Bischoff was fired, what? September 10th, 1999. Okay, that was a few days before Fall Brawl 99. Okay, Russo left in the beginning, I believe it was October 5th of 99. So he made the deal, and we just have this few-week period where, what the fuck's going on? Like he cost Eric his job. Eric was going to get fired before Russo was even a gleam in their eye or whatever. But Nash told him, you can come, but, he was a fan of his work. Nash would be a fan of his work because Nash didn't give a shit. Nash, collected the money, and I don't fault him for that, and he's gone through some personal shit. But I love Nash on these things, but there are times where he kind of annoys me because he won't take responsibility for some of the bad shit he came up with. But his plan, Russo's plan worked for 3 months. Oh, the ratings didn't go up by much, but they kind of went up. I'm like, the way they segmented the breaks and the matches and stuff like that, yeah, sure, ratings might have looked like they were kind of spiking up, but here's the thing. You could go up to like a 3.5, a 3.8, maybe even a 4. I mean, I don't know. They weren't going to compete with what Raw was doing. Raw at that point, SmackDown was doing better than that. Raw was doing like 6s and 7s. At least something like that. They were really excelling. WCW was cratering. WCW would have cratered even if they had gotten back up to 5. Because they were losing money. They lost $15 million in 1999. Because of all the wrestlers they had signed. Because of the fact that their pay-per-views had, bottomed out. But speaking of pay-per-views, let's go with some facts and figures. So, okay. Bischoff gets fired just before Fall Brawl 99. And after Road Wild 99, which I think had 230,000 pay-per-view buys or somewhere around that, they were down to 130,000 pay-per-view buys. The previous year, the bullshit War Games match where Ultimate Warrior got involved in the War Games. By the way, fuck the Ultimate Warrior. I'm glad he's dead. Hope he suffered mightily for all the bullshit that he caused. And the fact that Bobby Heenan back there, the fact that he, knocked his cancer and said that his cancer should have taken him. It was a damn shame that your mother didn't take you out of her goddamn womb before you were born. Granted, wrestling wouldn't have gotten the iconic... Yeah, this is going to be a mean-spirited review, and I don't really give a shit. So anyway, 275,000 pay-per-view buys in 98. That's for Fall Brawl. Halloween Havoc 99, the first pay-per-view under the Russo banner. Okay. 230,000 pay-per-view buys. Okay, 100,000 more. All right, they got some interest, kind of, sort of. 310,000 in 98. So they were still down, but they were up. They were up there. They were down slightly at Mayhem 99, replacing World War III. They had 200,000 pay-per-view buys. Fun fact, that is the last pay-per-view to come even close to 200,000 pay-per-view buys. But 250,000 pay-per-view buys in 98 for World War III. Starrcade 99. Things cratered further. That was 145,000 pay-per-view buys. and at 460,098. So yeah, Russo, your plan was really working. It was really working by that point. You took the pay-per-views down 85K in 2 months. Good fucking job, bro. Charmel basically said, you know, it was a shift, and it was hard to get used to. Charmel was good here. But, oh, it was a seismic shift, and, you know, a lot of people were pissed. I remember being pissed because I'm like, okay, you can mix some of this stuff in. You don't need such a tonal shift. Flair being buried in the goddamn desert. Pinata on a pole. Judy Bagwell on a forklift. David Flair being allowed to continue to wrestle in this company. I'm sorry. Bless the guy. I know he's been doing good outside of wrestling. He never belonged in the ring. Kevin Sullivan said this is not WCW. This is a comedy act. It was all for himself. A lot of the people were saying, Brett, Vince Russo was just another idiot. Goldberg, he's a shit stain. Trademarked by somebody, by a podcaster and his co-host. And then the 7 vignettes. And I could have swore the 7 stuff actually started before Russo got there. Maybe it started right around the time they got there. Because he's, you know, it was Dustin Rhodes, by the way, in white face makeup and an Undertaker, like, you know, floating entrance thing. Look at this crap I'm wearing. I look like Uncle Fester. And Vince McMahon filtered Russo's bad ideas. And that's basically what they realized. They realized it really quickly, like, oh shit, no wonder he was the head writer, because he had somebody above him. And others that were still above him, but not at Vince's level, that were able to say, no, we should do this differently. And it's like, oh, the politics. Russo kept blaming the politics. Not the fact that he was completely in over his head, like that Lit song from Titan AE. I feel bad comparing Lit to Vince Russo, except Vince Russo being lit on fire would not be the worst thing. But then his shit writing basically led to it. It's like, I don't want to be part of a committee. You just pay me. I got paid to sit at home for 3 months. He got paid to sit at home for 3 goddamn months. Meanwhile, there were people scraping by trying to earn a living and everything. And there were wrestlers out there taking bumps. Well, this guy sat at home on a fat paycheck. I mean, it was, what, $750,000 a year? A year? Even $500,000, even $50 for that goddamn idiot was too much money. Sullivan took the book, sold out 2,000. They put the title on Benoit. That wasn't the best idea in the world in hindsight, because him, Douglas, well, I think Douglas was going to give his notice, but then Douglas just ended up staying behind, because what if Shane Douglas had gone to join the Radicals? He would have flamed out in 6 months because he couldn't move. But yeah, you had Benoit, you had Malenko, you had Saturn, you had Guerrero. Bischoff was sitting in a restaurant with his wife. He says, I bet you they're going to call me by the time I'm back home. They did. And yeah, and Sullivan brought up this point. Benoit, Guerrero, Malenko, and Saturn weren't Hall, Nash, and Hogan. They could have been. They wouldn't have been, but it would have been a different direction. Because Hall, by that point, was almost done. Hall's last pay-per-view match would be Super Brawl 2000. Nash was intermittent. I mean, he would be on TV and be in matches, but he was a shell of what he was. Hogan, his last appearance would be at Bash at the Beach. I think his last appearance would have been there regardless. I'll get to that. But Brad Siegel basically says, we want you to oversee Russo. And then, you know, Russo's like, oh, it won't work. It won't work because you didn't want to listen to somebody. Look, Bischoff may not know that much about professional wrestling. You could tell listening to him here. But at least he understood how to kind of maybe sort of get things back in order a little bit. Much more than Russo. But the reboot episode, the new blood missing 19 times. Nash talking about that. I remember that shit and thinking, it was kind of dumb even when the Brood did it, but at least you had a professional company running it. And it also worked when WWF did it. And I swear to God, AEW basically just did the blood thing. And used the same concentration that WCW did, where it looked like it would give you a goddamn concussion and maybe 5 more and about 8 broken bones, because they didn't mix it properly. But Nash, this is where I have an issue with Nash. Take that clip and show it after the Finger Poke of Doom, and you tell me what killed WCW. Okay, sold out 99 after the Finger Poke of Doom. 300-something thousand pay-per-view buys. 330s, thereabouts. Super Brawl 9, 485,000 pay-per-view buys. Highest pay-per-view that they would have, you know, for the rest of their existence. Uncensored was around 375,000 pay-per-view buys, thereabout. And then Spring Stampede was 250,000. And from there, they would just descend further. But yeah, Nash, by that point, it was the New Blood stuff that killed WCW. Sure. That's why the ratings were cratering about 4 months later. Good job, Nash. Whatever makes you feel better about the bad decision that you were involved in. I'm not saying that Nash wasn't good. I'm not saying Nash doesn't still provide entertaining stuff. I'm not saying I'm not a fan of Nash. But that's some bullshit right there. The Finger Poke of Doom didn't lead to the immediate death of WCW. But it was basically the death knell. There was no hope. Eric Bischoff even said, like, oh, you know, we need a creative reset. The New Blood versus the Millionaires Club. The Young Guns. By the way, Shane Douglas was involved in the New Blood. Shane Douglas. There were other people involved in that were questionable. They put Ernest Miller as part of the New Blood. They put a lot of people in the New Blood. So they put pretty much everybody, you know, that was like, oh, they were held back by the establishment. Oh, but all these big guys had these big money contracts like Randy Savage. Randy Savage made one other appearance in WCW. I think it was during that 41-man Battle Royal, and I don't actually even remember what he did. I think he fought a couple people and then threw him out of the ring and then just left. I'm really struggling to remember that. But yeah, he was gone from WCW, like, shortly after that. The old guys earned their spots. And a lot did. Look, I mean, we can knock Hogan all they want. Hogan was big box office. Yes, they should have pushed Booker and they should have pushed others sooner, but was Ray going to be a WCW world champion? No. And he shouldn't have been. I'm sorry. Him being a world champion in WWE was... I mean, it was a choice. It was only because Eddie passed. Then he was WWE champion for, like, 90 minutes. Whatever. I'm just saying, they had nobody they could hang their hat on. They'd already cooled off Goldberg by that point. They cooled off Goldberg by the summer of 99. Like, yeah, he was still getting reactions, but Fall Brawl 99 was really, really rough to see. And then he put his hand through the goddamn windshield because Goldberg is a smart man. But then Booker T, basically, he was trying to justify this. There are times I have issues with Booker T. But anyway, Russo, in over his head, ready to rumble. Arquette was in, and look, you can go watch You Cannot Kill David Arquette, and you will actually see a very, very brief clip of me among the various YouTubers saying it was crap and that kind of stuff. And that's back when my channel was still in its infancy. And I issued an apology video. Basically, it was a dumb decision, and David Arquette didn't want to do it. And David Arquette gave his pay-per-view payoffs to the families of various wrestlers, including the Pillmans. You know, gave it to Melanie, and she snorted it right up her goddamn nose. I'm glad she's fucking dead. Scumbag twat. Hopefully she suffered mightily. Oh, I need to learn to forgive? No. She took so much money from those children. And she rotted away. And she didn't rot away soon enough. Brian should still be here. And she should have died in that hotel room. That being said, anyway, David Arquette did a lot of really good shit with his payoffs. Been through a lot of stuff. I got nothing but respect for David Arquette the person. It was a dumb decision, but it wasn't his fault. I've talked about that. You can check out my review of that whole thing. DDP knew it was bad. Everybody was like, this is terrible. Booker hadn't won it, and David was like, shit. Because he thought that, you know, he was a fan of wrestling. He didn't know that Booker hadn't won it. So, yeah, but Russo's like, oh, I'm on the cover of USA Today and all that and everything, and we got such a boost. We got such great attention. Spring Stampede, just before that, was 115,000 pay-per-view buys. And Spring Stampede in 99 was around 350,000. Thereabouts. Maybe 325. But still, that's way above 115. But okay, they went, because I think they went above uncensored. So okay, you got a little bit of a boost because of the reboot episode in these tournaments. It was also the last Spring Stampede pay-per-view. But then let's take a look at Slamboree, where, you know, Arquette was part of that triple cage match. The same venue, the Kemper Arena, where Owen fell to his death the year before, and they had Canyon take that plunge. And nobody thought to say anything. And I'm talking people in charge. I'm not talking the wrestlers. Bless Canyon. But Slamboree 2000 has 65,000 pay-per-view buys. For those of you who are math majors, that's 50,000 less. 195,000 in 1999. Slamboree 99 is another retro review I did. Great American Bash 2000, 85,000 pay-per-view buys. Okay, so you went up a little bit. Congratulations, Russo. You're almost turning no profit. 185,000 pay-per-view buys in 99. So good job. You were 100K lower. Speaking of 100K, Bash at the Beach 2000, 100,000 pay-per-view buys, down from 175,000 in 99. New Blood Rising back down to 85,000K. 235K for Road Wild 99. So yeah, you were doing great business, Russo. You were doing great business, bro. Mainstream publicity. I write a television show. You wrote bullshit is what you wrote, you son of a bitch. The fans were unhappy. Eric was just, what the hell's this? He did participate, by the way. He was the one that got pinned by Arquette, so Eric was as much of a problem, or as much of a part of this as anybody else. Russo would do the same thing. He would do the same thing today. Oh, fan, you know, I don't care. I couldn't care less. Well, you keep begging for jobs in wrestling, Russo, so clearly you do care. And what, he hold it for a week? He held it for 12 days. Yeah, Arquette didn't hold it for that much longer, but his reign was longer than 2 of Randy Savage's reigns with the world title. In 98 and 99. I'm serious. They were a day each. I'm not knocking Arquette. Bless Arquette. Wishing nothing but success. And Booker, you gotta push after being G.I. Bro and a whole bunch of convoluted bullshit. Booker didn't think he'd win the title because he was black, and I believe that. Once Eric left, Hogan really was disenfranchised with WCW. Hogan was disenfranchised by 99 anyway. Take a look after that Warrior match at Halloween Havoc 98. Take a look at him, finger poke of doom, being the champion, all that. None of it worked. None of it worked at all. Halloween Havoc 99 was it for Hogan. The next pay-per-view match he had, I believe, was Super Brawl 2000. Russo basically said, Brad, put Eric in charge. York. But Bash at the Beach 2000. Talked about it. Not going to litigate it any further beyond it was one of the worst goddamn pay-per-views that WCW put on. And it got talked about for all the wrong reasons. Here's the only thing I'm going to put up. Eric Bischoff talked about the fact that, oh, the idea was to create a tournament once they realized Hogan wasn't going to come back, and Hogan was going to come back at Halloween Havoc 2000 and be like, I'm the champion, you got to face me. July 9, 2000 was Bash at the Beach. Halloween Havoc 2000 was the end of October, I believe October 29th. Okay, so you were going to have a tournament go how long? Because they had the Mayhem tournament. I think it was a 32 or 64 person tournament. I think it was 32. They had a tournament take place over the course of like a month, maybe 6 weeks. No, I think it was a month. Okay, so let's say they didn't wait. They didn't start a tournament until August. And they had 8 weeks. How were you going to have a tournament go for 8 goddamn weeks with a depleted fucking roster you had, Eric? How the hell were you going to do that, Eazy-E? How were you going to do that? And also, Hogan at that point in 2000, what interest was that going to generate? What interest? He was bombing at that point. Russo felt Hogan and him would have gotten along if it hadn't been for Eric. No, Russo was a fucking snake, but Hogan was a bigger snake. He was basically a fucking boa constrictor and could choke anybody out, but Hogan at least drew money. Everyone was confused by Russo's promo. He couldn't make sense of his own goddamn shit. I cut this promo and I was legit pissed off. Yeah, a lot of fans were pissed off watching what the fuck you were doing. Booker, he was He won it at the Bash. He should have been utilized better. I watched all the television after that. I watched everything from the reboot episode all the way to the end. It was great that he was WCW champion. Yeah, they traded back and forth with a couple other people, but you know what? He meant something as champion. He was doing more. When you see the weekly TV, you can see at least Booker was trying to make the sense of it. He just couldn't make any sense of it. Russo still claims that he was working, but obviously Hogan with the lawsuit, that didn't work. Russo was, in charge until October 2nd of 2000, and then he was sent home. And I believe John Laurinaitis was running things after that. I believe he ran the WCW Halloween Havoc 2000. If he didn't run it, he was at least around for some of it. But basically, Viagra on a pole. Everything was just bad. Everything was on a pole. Everything was terrible. He felt he was better than 80% of the roster. He was putting himself on television. And the thing is, they act like he put himself on television from Bash at the Beach on. He was on television from the reboot episode, feuding with Ric Flair. That stuff was terrible. All that, and, having David Flair do the shit that he was doing. So he was already well and truly, ingratiated as the biggest cancer of professional wrestling. And that's what he is. And I say that to his fucking face. I say that in front of his goddamn kids. And wouldn't have a goddamn problem saying it, because look at what Vince Russo did to wrestling. Look at what he did. Look at what he was allowed to do. Fans like me could have done better than he did. And we wouldn't have been crying about the fact that, oh, Goldberg was trying to hurt him on purpose. Look, Goldberg hurting Brett, even though it wasn't intentional. Yeah, that's fucking unforgivable. But you know what? Him hurting Russo, hate to say it, Russo, you shouldn't have gotten in the goddamn ring, because Goldberg was a tank. Oh, he gave me a concussion. He hit me into the rail. It's a damn shame that your neck wasn't snapped and that you weren't a drooling goddamn vegetable. Yeah, I hate fucking Vince Russo, and he deserves to know deserves to know every fan hates him, and so many wrestlers hate him for what he was allowed to do, for what he did to professional wrestling, that I hate him, that I will... I'm going to channel a really, really, smart but complicated man. When it comes to professional wrestling, I too will live long enough to piss on his grave. If I have to be flown and pushed by somebody that's a caretaker, I will pay my own money, I will do that, and if I drop over right after that, it'll be worth it. Because, yeah, hate is a hell of a motivator. So anyway, Goldberg even said, if I wanted to hurt him, he'd be underground. And it's true. And that he hates the business. It's your fault it's your fault you hate the business, Russo, because you never belonged in it. Next week is the end of WCW, the merger, and all that stuff. Fuck Vince Russo and fuck everybody. Fuck his goddamn parents for not doing the right thing and getting rid of him. So much revisionist history, so much bullshit. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.